If you look across Africa today, you would see presidents who have done between 20 and as long as 47 years in office. We've seen different kinds of methods being adopted in ensuring that first they get into office and then get to extend their stay in office, from coups to amendment of the constitution within a couple of hours or days, as the case may be, just to perpetuate themselves in office. And the irony of it all is you look at those countries and then you're scratching your head to say what exactly has been the impact in the last 20, 30, 40, 45 or even 50 years, as the case may be. Incidentally, these countries are members of either ECOWAS or AU. In fact, in most cases, they are members of both. And then every time there's a coup, they come out to condemn these coups. And that development itself, or if you like, that practice, has also raised the question of whether or not leaders across the continent have actually led by example. I mean, how do you have a country, for instance, where the constitution says you can do a 5-year term and no more than 2 terms, which means maximum the constitution allows you 2 terms spanning in all 10 years. Yet you see in those same countries, these presidents, these heads of states been in office for decades and they are still not done. And that brings Gabon to mind real quick, because we are learning that the president who had just been ousted yesterday, Ali Bongo, had succeeded his late father, Omar, in 2009. And somebody said, for those who don't get it, the perspective, or one of the several perspectives, is this man had become president of his country just at about the same time when Obama took over leadership in the US. Now think about that for a second. Obama had done 8 years and he passed the baton to former President Trump, who also did 4 years. Now, if you do the math, it's simple, that's 12 years. Now, President Biden is doing his 3rd year in office. All right, so if you put it all together, this is a man who had done 14 years and just won election again a few days ago. And now these coupists are now saying that that election process, I mean, the process that produced these results, which actually announced the president or the ousted president as the winner, was not only fraudulent, but was marred by very grievous irregularities. And they are saying, or if you like, claiming that's the basis on which they are having to annul the elections and then, of course, do the same with public institutions. And now there's the palpable fear across the continent that this is a culture that has come to stay, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's difficult not to think, to think otherwise, because look at Gabon, just towards the end of July, and now you have, Niger, and now you have Gabon also following suit. And leaders across Africa are now saying that, look, we cannot continue this culture. The question we must answer on the show this morning and going forward is, what must we do and what must we undo as a continent, as governments, and as a people to ensure that Africa is able to either as countries or as a collective provide forward-looking leadership in such a way that Africa does not become the underdog in the Committee of Nations. President Bola Tinubu had railed very seriously against coup when he was in Guinea-Bissau, but it was just a matter of 2 weeks down the line before Niger happened. And of course, we'll now see what has happened in Gabon. And people are now asking, what country is next? And even democracy is now being questioned across Africa. In fact, whether it's the definition of it or the practice of it. Incidentally, I'm joined by 2 gentlemen this morning. One is here with us in the studio, Justice Ojeno, legal practitioner. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's always my pleasure.
Yes, on the program. We'll also be joined from Gombe State via Zoom by Dr. Babayo Sule. He's the head of Department International Relations, Federal University of Gombe. I understand that we've been able to establish connection already with Dr. Sule. Doc, it's a delight to have you join us this morning on the show.
Thank you very much. Good morning, listeners. It is my pleasure to be with you this good morning.
Great. I'm going to start with you because I recall you and I had spoken at least twice just as part of the aftermath of the very ugly incidents in Niger Republic. And you did talk about how that it is natural to be concerned about these sort of developments. I remember quite clearly. You had also cited instances like Burkina Faso and Mali. And then, of course, you and I talked about Niger. Now we know better. Gabon, for what a better words, has had his own fair share of this sweeping, if you like, phenomenon. What have been your thoughts and assessments since yesterday morning?
Well, thank you very much. All to start with, it is unfortunate that while other countries are trying to land their own rocket on the moon, while other countries are going to artificial intelligence, other countries are busy transforming their economies into intelligence economy instead of manufacturing economy. While here in the African continent, we are still battling with the issue of coups, military coups, and a setback to democratization. It is really a sad and unfortunate event. But these are not without some cogent reasons behind them. First of all, I want us to look at the pattern and the trend in which the coups are taking place. If you look at it, scrutinize it closely, you will see that it is coming from the Francophone countries, all of them, starting from Chad to Burkina Faso to Guinea to Mali, Niger Republic, and now Gabon. All of them are Francophone countries that were colonized by France. So there is a message here. Why are Anglophone countries of Nigeria, Gambia, Sierra Liberia, Ghana, and others are not witnessing the same phenomena? The simple answer is that while Britain that colonized our countries decided to relinquish power completely, both politically and economically, to her former colonies, France failed to adopt the reality or failed to accept the reality that these African countries, specifically West Africa, are now independent states. What they need is a mutual and symbiotic relationship and not the continuous colonization through other means. But France decided and continued to colonize them directly and not indirectly. Even the currency that these countries are using is from France, CFA. Even the resources and mineral endowment of these countries are taken over and controlled by the French companies and the French government. If whatever it is an indirect colonization continued by France. So what I am now perceiving is these Francophone countries are now revolting against France's excessiveness in West Africa, or rather in Africa. And it is a clear message that is glaring that we are tired of your continuous oppression, domination, and unchecked control. So therefore, if you look at it, you will see that most of these places where these coups are recently taking place, the citizens are jubilating. Instead of them to rise up and protest against unconstitutional government, instead of them to detest forceful seizure of government, people are celebrating. Look at yesterday how they are hailing and chilling and praising the military in Gabon. Also look at Niger, and they are chasing away French invoice, and they are also closing or stopping or delinking relationship with France. All these are telling you this message. That is one aspect of it, I think, maybe that we need to look into. Secondly, is the coup culture in Africa is always contagious. It's just like a wild bushfire. Once a coup starts in the neighborhood, it continues to spread like a wild bushfire based on the history of the Africa's coup. You can decided to split Africa's coup into four major stages or five: 1950s to 1960s, 1960s to 1970s, 1970s to 1980s, and then 1980s to 1990s. And of course, we can now say 2020s, or rather 2011s, beginning from 2013 in Egypt, now to 2020s and beyond. We have 5 stages of coups in Africa. So a coup culture is always accompanied with coups and counter coups, as in the case of Sudan now, and many other places. So it is part of the political process in Africa, which we must accept. And why is this so? Simply is because of what we call democratic failure. In our own view, we the political scientists and the student of international relations, there is no democracy in Africa. What we have is just a charade of just a mere ordinary ritual of handling periodic election in order to qualify the system to be called with a nomenclature of democracy, but the real institutionalization and the process of democratic governance is never instituted on the African continent. The colonialists came and made us with our own diverse socio-economic and political system. They decided to dislocate and fragmented these systems, introduce their own system, which is incompatible with our own indigenous culture, history, and system. Instead of them to allow us to democratize in our own way, the global crusaders of democracy continue to prescribe an incompatible democracy on African state. And they continue to come up with different models of emasculating and continuous domination of our system in such a way that while they are insisting that we must democratize, they refuse to insist that democratic values must be embraced. For example, look at Nigeria today. We have three tiers of government: the federal government, the state government, and the local government. Under the watch of the so-called global champions of democracy and governance, the local government system is emasculated, dominated, and exploited by the state government. And the champions of democratization are not insisting that these three independent types of government must be independent of each other, which is part of a good grassroots democratization and institutionalization. And look at also what is happening in the case of Gabon that is now under our discussion. Imagine the same family, a father and a son, controlling a state or ruling a state for 55 years. Imagine the years. As you just mentioned, even the son alone spent about 14 years when Barack Obama spent 8 years in the United States of America. Trump spent 4 years, and Biden is now spending 4 years. 3 presidents in America. Within this period of 55 years, in America, there were not less than 10 to 12 presidents. And now you have only 2 presidents. A father in a democratic system that is non-monarchical, bequeathing power as inheritance to his son. And the son now is altering the constitution to continue to rule through other means. This is what you call civilian coup or democratic coup. Look at what is happening in Cameroon. Paul Biya is there for now 44 years, continuously altering and amending the constitution in order to rule. And the global champions of democratization, that is the international community and the AU and others, are busy watching without insisting that genuine democracy must be institutionalized. So I think what the so-called Democrats are doing in Africa, coupled with misgovernance, mismanagement, misrule, and a kind of social